Okay, hi. Welcome. I'm Mrs. Garrity and I teach Society and Culture Stage 6, which is Years 11 and 12. So, you've got a child doing a PIP, and you're probably wondering what that is, why they do it, and how you can best support them. So, this PowerPoint and this video is going to actually cover what is it, why is it so big, what is my kid talking about, what they should do, and how can you help. And some of the helping stuff is going to be obvious, some of it might be counterintuitive. So we're just going to go through this and hopefully this helps you, because it's such a big task that they really need all the support they can get. So what is it? This is straight from the syllabus here. The PIP enables students to demonstrate the development of their interests, that's important, research skills, an intricate part of the project, and personal experiences, that's got to come through very strongly, concerning the interactions between persons, society, cultures, and environments across time. In particular, students will be able to demonstrate the development and application of social and cultural research methods in completing their PIP. They've been looking at research methods since year 11 and developing a range of different skills in order to know what the research method is, when it's best to apply it, and how to apply it, how to design it, how to put it into practice. And then the important bit is what you do with your data afterwards. Now, they are very well aware of that, and that can be as easy or as complicated as they want to make it. So it will start to unfold as it goes along. So the personal interest project must be a topic of the student's own choice. It's very easy as a parent to think, well, they've had this interest, they should do this. They've had this experience, they should do that. I'm also guilty of doing that with my son, who's currently doing his HSC. And the topic I thought he would naturally do, and I thought the PIP would write itself for him, he just went, nah, not interested. And so I had to take off my parent hat and put my teacher hat back on and say, you know what, no, it's because he's got to be able to sustain it over a long period of time. So it must also be related to the course, and preferably the Year 12 HSC course. So, you know, we're not doing, in my pattern of study, we're not doing the pop culture or the, I'm not doing pop culture. We are doing belief systems and we're doing conformity and non-conformity. We're not doing, there is another one that it's not on my mind at the minute because it's not my topic, inclusion and exclusion. But their PIPs may fall within that. So if I see that happening, I will, say, hey, go and check out the syllabus, because it fits outside of an area we're actually doing, but it does fit in there. So that's important. It's got to connect to the syllabus in some way. Develop appropriate methods, so research methodologies. You need cross-cultural perspective. That cross-culture can be Australia versus America, Australia versus China, the West versus the Middle East in perceptions of something or experience. And it can also be generational, but they've got to be really careful with cross-generational, that they're not actually just doing the continuity and change, which is the next dot point. So that's something for you to kind of question them. Is it related to the course? So if you change these into questions, why have you chosen the topic? Because that needs to come through. How is it related to the course? And get them to explain it to you. And in fact, if you don't have much knowledge of the course, I think that's a really rich experience for them to talk to you about it. How have you used appropriate research methods? How'd they go? What worked? What didn't work? Because part of it is they've got to be reflective of their own process as well. You say, well, what is your cross-cultural? So these are the questions that straight away the teacher, if you get a tutor, which I don't necessarily recommend because you want one who's actually teaching the course and knows what they're talking about, preferably someone even who has marked the PIPs before would be a good resource there. But that's where we start with. These are the questions that as the kids come to their classroom teacher with a topic, we go, well, what about this and what about this and what about that? They probably find it a little bit painful, but it gets them thinking about it, and that's how the topic gets fleshed out. So what is it? Personal interest project. It's got to be their own interest, not your interest, not the family's interest, not what you think they should do. It's really going to come from within. And a lot of the kids do learn a lot about themselves during this process. It's actually really beautiful to watch other students go through it. As a mother, I'm going to be seeing it for the first time. We've already had some rich conversations at home. So you can really get to delve into who is your child? Because as they're going through these life stages, they are becoming their own person independent of us. And this is a great project for them to really think about who am I and what am I passionate about and what's my identity? Because at the end of the day, that idea of identity, who are we, what makes the world go round, that's kind of the bread and butter of society and culture and why I love the subject so much. I'm very passionate about society and culture. Some of these kids, they go on to become psychologists, sociologists, criminologists. It opens the whole big wide world for them. And even if they don't go into the social sciences, to be able to communicate with other people, to be able to design research, that's a very real world. It's almost, this subject's been going for over 30 years. It's really this PBL, project-based learning, that, is all the rage in other faculties now. But the social sciences and history faculties who run society and culture, we've been doing this all along. And so, and we know that it really works and it gets some rich data for the kids to grapple with and improve some of their literacy skills. It's going to be submitted early term 3 to NESA for external marking. It's not marked at school. It cannot be marked at school, even if your child's got a HSC marker for a teacher. They can't actually say, oh, this is the mark it will get. The marking centre sets the standards and it's marked externally, and you don't get your mark back as a raw mark. It is its own topic within the SAC course. 30% of course time is dedicated to it. They'll be given time in class to think about their idea, refine their ideas, create research methods, conduct research, write findings, draft, edit, consult with the teacher. If they're in my class, that will be me. If you're watching this and you're not one of my kids' parents, drop me any questions that you may have and I'll do my best to help you out. There's also a booklet that I do talk about that I give in class. If you drop a comment on my channel, I can email that to you and you can have a copy of that booklet. It's just got some scaffolds and some tips, and I'm 100% certain that all teachers are doing a process of this. This is just my way of doing it. And so they do get time in class, time with me, time to go off and do their research. Sometimes they come and use the classroom to do their focus study, during a free period or, so they get a lot of support from school. There will be times, though, when you will need to take them places. If they're under a certain age and they want to go and interview, say, a GP, there are certain ethical considerations to take into account that you'll need to take them. And ethics is really important. And so they need, I'm really like it to be ethically designed. Although we don't have an ethics committee like at uni, it's coming through the teacher, and at any point, if we kind of pause and go, oh, I don't think so, that's pretty much a signpost that if there were an ethics committee, it probably wouldn't go through with that. And so we find ways to kind of make it more ethical so that they don't miss out on that opportunity and the data that they may get. They will be doing a lot of work at home, a lot of work. It is a major work. It does mean that for their exam, 40% of it's already done. They're in complete control of it, and they can get some really good marks if they follow the criteria, if they follow the scaffolds in the booklet. It's so important for them to not risk wasting those really good marks that they can make. And so for a 2-unit subject, normally we would do 4 subjects, 4 topics or units of work, and there'd be 4 essay questions or 4 sections anyway that they have to actually do in the exam. This is actually a shorter exam and only 3 sections, because they've already done this. And so it's a great way, if kids don't do well under exam conditions, for them to make those marks up. Some kids don't pull it out of the memory bank at the time, but they're great writers. They've done a great PIP. And so this is really going to push them along with that. And if you want any more information, go and check out the NESA website. There's heaps of support documents there, marking criteria, frequently asked questions. Really go and have a look at that. But don't hesitate to leave some questions on this video. Or if you are one of my parents, just make a phone call to the school or just email me. Are we actually teaching it in class? And with the amount of work they're doing, you may start to question, well, gosh, how much of this is, like, are they actually doing anything in class? We work out how many weeks we have and divide up according to what the syllabus tells us we need to spend a percentage of the time working on. So yes, they are working on it in class. That's going to look very different. Sometimes it's skills-based and I'm teach a skill and then they go off and do it. Sometimes it's purely, okay, you're far enough in on this process, you need to just do some of the doing, because there's a lot of reading involved in order to form the idea. Reading, viewing. If they're not feeling up to reading something today, okay, watch a YouTube clip about it, all right? You've just got to keep that momentum going. So my class has been given a booklet with information and scaffolds, sentence starters, word starters. I've taught them how to triangulate data, which is, of course, bringing 2 or more research methods together. So my primary research questionnaire showed that 100% of students think that Mrs. Garrity's ace. The secondary data of the past 5 years exit polls that we did a content analysis in showed that only 90% of people thought that Mrs. Garrity was amazing. Therefore, what we can surmise from this is that on the whole, Mrs. Garrity's doing okay. All right, so they've got to make a new meaning about it. Then they reflect on, what did their survey, maybe the questionnaire only asked kids who liked me. So that would be a problem. They really need to ask all of them, and then they might find that the data's the same. Okay, so it's about them then reflecting, saying, look, this is what we found, but if I did this again, I might do it a bit differently. 30% of class time is allocated to completing it in class time. And so what I do is I've got a scope and sequence that's got PIP week, then what we're doing within the other things that we're learning about, the core and the 2 depth studies. And then I might slot in the PIP again. And then, because it's a bit of a juggling act, we've got lots of content to get through before there's assessments. We've got lots of content to get through. That also is going to help them with the PIP as well. That first core topic, we look at research methodology again. We look at theories of social change. We look at continuity and change. What is it? We look at cross-cultural, how do you embed it? We're back at looking at the key concepts and the SAC language. for the topics that we're doing. And then I show them the skills of referencing and annotated bibliography, synthesis of data, drafting and editing, SAC language and concepts. For drafting and editing, there's a few really good tools out there that they can use to check their work for free before it gets to me. One of them is called the Hemingway app, really good tool. And Grammarly has a free section, but then they try to push you to upgrade. I've never bothered with the upgrade. I feed it through both of those when I'm trying to get really refined content. So that's a great place for them to be looking at some of that editing. And they're really editing in terms of, have I got this synthesis of data from the very beginning? Have I got my SAC language in there? As well as the grammar and punctuation. So they're going back and just asking themselves those first questions I suggested that you could be asking them. And the SAC language and concepts, that comes from the syllabus. At the back of the syllabus, there's a glossary. And I tell the kids to always have that glossary printed out next to them when they're writing anything in SAC so that they can embed it. You want it embedded and mixed through, and as opposed to they come through later and then they're just plonking SAC terms on. It's like, I guess, if you were baking a cake, you blend it in so that it's all there and all the pieces come together, but you don't really necessarily notice, but you'd notice if it was just plonked. So if you just kind of went, oh, I forgot to put flour in my cake, I'm just going to plonk it on top and then throw it in the oven, you're going to notice that it's not going to look quite right. So you've got to embed them, integrate them, synthesize them, and they'll get blended right in. So again, am I teaching it in class? Sometimes yes, and sometimes it's more discreet. There's assistance offered outside of class to coach them along, not do it for them. I've got to sign off to say it's all their own work, so I can't be, too heavy-handed, but just coaching them along the process. I'm happy to do video tutoring with them if they need to, if they make an appointment outside of school hours as well. I really get passionate about getting this done. A lot of the tasks will be completed in their own time. Oops. They will check in with the teacher regularly, and that's part of our ongoing process of saying it is their own work. They're becoming an expert on this topic, and so the teacher's just to guide the process and offer advice and support in terms of what we know the markers are looking for and what's going to give them bang for their buck. They'll have class time as well to develop their project. There's scope for peer assessment, the necessary skills. Some of them have been taught, some are in the process of being taught. It's an ongoing process. Much of the concepts are taught across year 11 and 12, though the PIP needs to link to the year 12 syllabus, which I talked about earlier. So, and I said, we're not doing pop culture, but their PIP may fit into it. So they can go and have a look at that syllabus. They can go and look at that chapter in the textbook and get some ideas on the theories that they may apply. It's not moving on. Okay, I'm back. So why is it so big? They do receive notification of this task in the first lesson of year 12. They also know it's looming. Some kids do drop it as a subject because it's coming and they're concerned and, they're not sure they're going to manage it, or they're doing other subjects with projects. If they are doing other subjects with projects, they really need to be on top of everything and managing their time appropriately. It's a topic within itself, and 30% of class time is actually dedicated to its completion, sometimes through teaching of skills, sometimes through them just doing it. They undertake at least 2 primary research methods. Now, primary and secondary research methods, you're going to hear this. What is it? What's the difference? Primary are the research methods they create. Questionnaires, content analysis, focus groups, interviews they conduct. That's primary. They've made it themselves. If you remember from your time in history, primary sources are ones that are made at the time. I guess that's kind of a very similar way to try to think about this. It's made at the time now, but made by the student. Secondary research is what other people have written. So the secondary sources are literature reviews, what are other people saying about it, what other research has been conducted, books, YouTube clips, TED Talks, they're secondary data. And so you want to bring those two together and then make a new meaning about it. They undertake a substantial amount of secondary research. So that's the books, journal articles, docos, TV shows, all of that stuff that they haven't made. That's secondary. Also, there's a dot point within the criteria that looks at personal, I don't know, and public knowledge. I've got to get I'd have to see it to get the terminology exactly right. But basically, one's public knowledge, and public knowledge is anything that's kind of already out there. The personal, the individual, the private, that's what they're bringing to it. And there is a criteria that looks at that idea. So they really do need to have the two. Worth 40% of the HSC exam mark. I keep bringing that up because it's super important. And there's a number of components needed to create it. I think the next... Okay, we're going to look at the PIP structure now. So these are the different components it needs. The introduction, which is about 500 words. I've left that off, sorry. They're going to look at what's their topic about? What is their hypothesis? Why have they chosen it? How does it contribute to a better understanding of society and culture? And then you kind of should be there previewing what are the research methods that you went through. And if they used a few different ones, just the big ones that packed a punch. If they got an interview with, say they were doing something on East Timor and they got an interview with Janana Guzmao or Jose Ramos Horta, that goes there. All right. Your big ticket research. And then they may be a bit reflective at that point, a little bit, but the log is much more reflective. It's a summary of the development of the final product. What did they do? How did they do it? Would they do anything differently? And in both of these, you need the personal aspect coming through. There's no point doing a topic on refugees if they don't know any refugees, they've never met a refugee, they're not a refugee. It's got to have this personal connection somehow. And it's also got to be a topic that there's no topic bias. In the marking process, we mark what we can, but what's presented to us. But the problem comes with some topics are limiting in terms of the primary research they can do, the secondary research that can be done, and some of them it's like, yeah, so what? Like if you do something on beauty and body image, Instagram makes girls feel insecure about themselves. Well, duh. What are you going to do differently there? You could make it a bit more interesting and maybe look at a different demographic. So maybe cross-cultural, there could be women under 25 and women who are maybe in their 50s and 60s. What are they doing on Instagram and how are they being, how's it impacting them? It really comes down to, you could have a topic that is a little bit, well, duh, but then the approach you take with it, the hypothesis you make about it, would possibly bring it up. And it also has to be something that they can do for a sustained period of time, not run out of words, because as we see with the central material, that's 2,500 to 4,000 words, and they want to be using the whole word limit, right, to really, really get there and get an A range response. So it needs to be a rich topic that you can pull apart. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. We know that. It's already in the media. You'd have to jazz that up, yeah? So what? We know. I've read the papers. You'd look at another aspect of it. Racism is on the rise. Okay, what would you use as your evidence? You could maybe look at particularly how feminism and racism intersect. Okay, so it's about kind of bringing a few different SAC concepts together as well. If you were looking at anti-Semitism, you could look at Jewish feminism as a response to that, perhaps. I don't know how. But, you know, it's those really clever ways of bringing something that, like the marker opens it and they go, wow, I wonder what they're going to do with this. And then it does come down to the execution, though. So you can have a great topic. You could, you know, have all the buzzwords and still not quite get it. So that's just a bit of advice there on the topic. We'll talk a bit more about that. So the central material needs to be accompanied by photos, tables, graphs, diagrams, infographics. They need their visual element but it needs to actually add something to it. It can't just be a graph put there for the sake of it. Conclusion. So going back to the log, it's conceptual. We don't want to know, I left it too late, so therefore I didn't start doing my research till April. It's the development of the idea. Now, maybe it is only going to be, you know, they started it in May, which they shouldn't. They should start it in October. They started in May and they've got a deadline in July, August. Well, then they need to tell us conceptually what they were doing as opposed to timelines. As soon as it's a timeline, you're like, oh, no, that's not the way it's meant to be. So edit that out. These are things you can pick up and you can fix for them before it comes to school. Conclusion reiterates what they've done, what they've learned, how has this process assisted them, what did they learn, did they go on some sort of development in a particular area of themselves. The resource list is an annotated reference list. There's scaffolds there for that. So an annotation is, this is the journal article, you cite it, and then you talk about how you used it, was there bias, how useful was it, how reliable was it, what you drew out of it. So it's reflective and it's critical of the source. You also annotate your own research in the primary research. And in my booklet, I've got a scaffold for that, but basically you just, it's a summary of what they did. There's no appendix. Some kids insist on adding an appendix with their surveys, with more graphs, with things. If it's that good, embed it into the central material. Don't put it into the appendix. The appendix is not read. It's not part of it. Don't add an appendix, okay? So what's your kid talking about? So you're going to need to be a sounding board. You may not really know. They just need to talk. They need to get it out. They need to kind of conceptually get it going. They're going to have mind maps. They're going to have all sorts of things that they're going to want you to look at. They're going to be excited about something that they've done, someone who's got back to them and is going to do an interview who you've never heard of, but in the circle of academia that they're looking at, it's a coup, okay? Get excited with them. Check their booklet if you're not sure what something means, or go to the NESA website, or give me a call, or if you're not one of my parents, leave me a comment and I'll do my best to help you out. Sometimes they just need to bounce an idea and you don't need to have an answer. So often they come to me, I don't have the answer. I just say, well, just give it a go. See if it works, because even if it doesn't work, we can still write about it, because it makes sure that you are actually being reflective, because you'll say, well, I did this bit of research, it showed this, which didn't appear to do much. Sometimes too, they'll do a questionnaire, they don't use it, but out of the questionnaire they learn, actually that didn't get the data I wanted, I didn't ask the questions right. So it is all part of the learning process for them. The topic they should do is, like I said, my son's got a topic that I thought he should do. He's not doing it because he doesn't want to, he doesn't care about it enough. Okay, so you may think your child should do a certain topic because they've had an experience or an interest previously. You've got to let them guide this. They may not have that interest. Now, some things are too close to you as well, so you can't touch them academically. It's very tricky. Something they can sustain and research over nearly a year without getting bored or losing interest, or the answer is really obvious. Something they have an interest in and not what they should have an interest in. I know it's very frustrating because they're becoming their own people at this age. And we looked at adolescent development in year 11, and this is just part of that process of breaking away, becoming their own person. You don't lose them. So you just kind of move them along and support them and just ask them, is it going to fit in with the situation? My son's also doing woodwork and he wants to make something. And I was like, I don't know that I could use that because I figure I'm paying for the materials. It's probably going to end up in my house. And, I was trying to get him to think of something else. And in the end, I was like, no, put my teacher hat on, not my mum hat. I said, you're going to have to go see your teacher and ask him. So, that's an idea, but if not, just go with your idea, because I don't know the woodwork syllabus. It might seem hard to believe, but these hands don't do woodwork. It's got to be a topic that can be narrowed down, and it's got to be narrowed down in order to be sustainable. Some kids, they actually have big topics that could be a PhD in communication or psychology. So they're too big for a student to do in year 12. While there's no topic bias, the marking at the marking centre, that's really important for you to make a note of. The topic needs to be rich enough to have more than a yes, no, or a basic answer, and they can research to the point of writing 4,000 words about it. So just be supportive. Whatever they choose, be supportive, because our kids want our validation and they want to know that we think what they're doing is useful or a good thing, or because at the end of the day, they want our validation. So really just kind of be supportive, but critical in terms of asking them those questions from the beginning. What's your cross-culture? What's your continuity and change? Where are you applying a theory? What theory are you going to apply? Are you going to apply one from the textbook, or are you going to have to go and find another one that might fit better and be a bit more sophisticated? Just be a sounding board to ask them those questions. Okay, I think they get sick of me asking them, so you may as well be disliked as well. It's got to fit into the SAC subject. Cross-cultural aspect is clear, and they can compare with an interesting cross-cultural group. Groups that are a little bit different and a little bit fringy and not overdone are really good. So if they're maybe looking at a strain of Christianity, then having the cross-culture, instead of it necessarily having to be Judaism or Islam or something like that, why not look at mainstream Christianity versus Mormonism, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses? That's interesting, and they are, there is a lot of academic literature on these other groups, but it's not one you hear a lot about. And so I think that just kind of gives them something really interesting to sink their teeth into. A topic that has a link to continuity and or change. So how have things stayed the same? How have things changed? Have they even changed? a topic that is rich enough to research for a year. The thing about the topics that the kids choose too is that the best ones go into the state library, but really you could almost do a content analysis of the topics kids have chosen over the years as a reflection of what do kids over time think about the world, worry about in terms of the world, what are their concerns? And it would be interesting, if I had time, to go and have a look at those, PIPs from 30 years ago. What were kids writing about? What were they concerned about then versus what are they concerned about now? Social media wouldn't have been mentioned, obviously, 30 years ago, but were there other forms of media? This idea of making people feel bad about themselves has been something that TV, magazines, they've been doing it. The advertising industry relies on it. So it is a continuity. And, I would think we should be past that. So if I was looking at that, I'd say, well, why have we not? We know better. We know what they're doing. Why do we still keep falling for it? Rather than, does Instagram give bad body image? Yeah, duh. Why do we keep falling for it? When we know better, we know we've got the body of literature. We know we're being manipulated, and yet we still put up with it. There's also topics that should be avoided for ethical reasons. It could be triggering to the marker. It's certainly going to possibly be unethical to find research participants, victims of particular violent acts, various sexual harassment type things. Tread carefully. Just be very mindful that some taboo subjects, yeah, they're edgy, they're cool. At uni, they could go nuts with it. But in a school setting, they're not appropriate. So if something makes you go, I don't know, chances are it's a no. So, I use that as my rule of thumb. When the kids come to me and they say, I'm thinking of doing blah, 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 I'm like, that to me is a sign, no, we've got to rework this. Maybe we can make it more ethical. I had a student that I tutored who did a topic on gun violence and was comparing it with Australia and America, and why does America have a bigger problem than us? Why were we willing to kind of have gun reform? They're not, those sorts of ideas. Anyway, she looked at shootings in safe spaces. Obviously, it's unethical to go and talk to someone who has been a school shooter, unsafe as well for the student, or to just barrage someone who's not in the public eye, whose child has committed one of these shootings. However, there are people in the public eye. There was a guy who did a TED talk who he said he had the makings of a school shooter. I said, right. So he's processed it. He now does mentoring. He's a bit of a life coach now. I said, okay, you can contact him to get maybe an interview. But if he weren't in the public eye, it would be completely inappropriate to contact, because we're assuming that he's kind of come to a point of realization and understanding about himself that maybe other people haven't achieved. And you're not going to trigger them because they're already out there talking about it. Same, there's a woman who her son was a school shooter. She does TED Talks. She's very open in the public. She wants to stop this happening again. She's become a real advocate. You could either do content analysis of her TED Talk, or you could contact and see if she was up for answering some of your own questions. But really, so it's really just about the context and what is this person doing and where are they at in their journey. You don't want to re-trigger something. And then it's just about those ethics, and the topic has to be ethical as much as the research methodology. So how can you help, right? That's going to be your big question. How can I help as a parent? Don't write it for them. So you need to check in with them regularly. How are they going? Where are they up to? ask them open-ended questions about, what have you learnt from that research? What are 3 interesting things that you found from that reading? Rather than sort of closed-ended questions, get them thinking about it. Share their questionnaire at work or online, anywhere. They're going to need as many different age groups, cultural groups as possible. Quite often they come to me saying, I need old people, and by old people they mean, like my age, which, yep. That means everyone watching this video, they consider you old people too. But they need that mix of age groups. And at work, you're going to have a whole range of them. On your Facebook, I assume you're going to have a whole heap. So you've got some wider networks for them. Read their drafts and ask them questions if something's not clear, just to get them to further refine it out, because chances are I'm going to go, I don't understand what they're saying either. So again, check in with them as they do the process, not the prices, the process. Ask to see their checklist in the booklet, or, there'll be some sort of documentation that the teacher is using. Ask to see where they're up to with it. I've also got an expanded marking guideline for them to self-assess. You could maybe go through and have a look at what's in there and say, oh, okay, this is where I think they're tracking. And be honest with it, so you could be a bit of a peer assessor for them. Don't see it through rose-coloured glasses. This really is needing nitpicking. Gentle nitpicking is what I call it. Gently nudge them to remain motivated. That can be hard. If you haven't seen any evidence of PIP work for a while, just say, hey, how are you going with that? Can I have a little look? And maybe a conversation like that will get them to go, oh, I've got to go see Miss, or they may have a chat with you and it spurs the next idea on. Help them to set some deadlines. So I set some deadlines. All teachers set some little deadlines, but maybe you can help chunk those even more down and fit it in around the family calendar, perhaps, if that's how you roll. You may need to accompany them to do some primary research. They shouldn't be going anywhere too dodgy either. Ethically, they need to find if they shouldn't be going, if they're doing something about pill testing. It's okay if they go and see a local member. It's okay if they go and see a nurse educator or someone like that, but they shouldn't be going into any unsafe spaces without you. If they use Facebook to go into various support groups or to communicate with people, I suggest that they either use their parents' Facebook account or that they make up another one that they can then close off. And if they go into any Facebook groups, they do need to let the admin of the group know, look, I'm doing a bit of research on this. They'll probably also give them a bit of advice too. But just to keep those ethics going, encourage them to talk to their teacher. Their teacher really is invested in this PIP. We're very passionate. Society and culture teachers are always big advocates for their subject. They want the kids to do really well. We start to feel like it almost is our project too. We want to see our kids move forward. There's a special relationship that the society and culture teacher gets with the kids, because you do need to get to really know them to be able to help them delve into that personal thing. And they need to feel safe enough to share certain topics with you. Sometimes they'll say, I don't want anyone else to know, like in the class. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. As long as it's not something I need to go and notify anybody else about. And of course, I live by the fact that executive could look at their work at any time and I'm happy with it. So that's sort of the way I like them to be progressing with their ethics. And feel free to contact their teacher for guidance on how to guide them. We're here to help. We want everyone to get through this process, and we don't want anyone to be non-certified. We want them all. I've never had a non-certification, knock on wood, well, I've got my computer. I've never had a non-certification. So even if they've they've left it too late. There's always time to redeem yourself. So I think I may have come to the end of my thing. I've bombarded you with a lot of information. There is a lot of information to it. It is a big piece of work. This is just a snapshot for you because some schools bring in parents for a meeting. I would prefer to do it this way so that if you want to go back, look at my PowerPoint, listen to something, you've got questions from anything I've said. Sometimes it doesn't go through the first time. And, the kids can watch this as a bit of a reminder as well. But I really did pitch this for parents because you're a big part of this process. They want to know that you think they've done a good job and that they've done a topic that's worthwhile and important, and they want your support. They might give a I don't care attitude, but deep down they do. They want your support. They do want you checking in on them, but not nagging. So just, softly. And if they do get a bit emotional, just tell them, look, take time away from it. Maybe they need a week away from it. So there'll be extremes. There'll be people who aren't touching it, and there'll be kids that are picking the eyes out of it, and they need a break. They just need to have some distance between them and the project and then come back to it with fresh eyes. Anyway, I hope I've answered a lot of your possible questions. It would be great if you could leave any other questions, because then I could maybe come back later and edit this video and embed some of the questions that are left for me by parents, by kids. But good luck. May the force be with you. And I really hope that you see them create a great piece of work and see that maybe learn something new about your child. Like I learned something new about the kids, even if I've taught them since year 7. I'm like, wow, I didn't know. Or it's really a powerful project. So on that note, I'm going to go and hit me up with any questions, or if you want any resources, let me know and I will do my best to assist with that. For now, I will see you later. Mrs. Garrity signing off.